here, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I guess Cliff is not here, but I wanted to thank them for asking me to do this Zoom, and also Mona and David for helping make it happen. But I have to give a special thanks to Jack because he has worked so hard with me to get the film clips to play nicely with Zoom. We were hoping for the best, but it was not easy. Anyway, I had proposed this topic, Hollywood healers, for the reunion presentation day, thinking I would reduce it to 15 minutes or so, and that it would work. It was a talk I had put together for a conference in Rome a year or two before. I soon realized, though, that since it featured film clips, a significantly shortened version just was not going to work, and so I suggested a different topic, and that's the one I presented at the reunion in November. Jack, Jim, and Cliff had been intrigued by my original topic, the Hollywood healers, and asked me if I'd be willing to do it in another occasion, which is today. And I said yes. So here we are. So I'm going to start right now. For about 15 years, I taught a seminar at Yale College for undergraduate seniors called Madness at the Movies. It's a course I invented, and I used films to explore the symptoms and the experience of madness, of severe psychiatric illness. And very important to me, the course included an introduction to some of the best films of the last 50 years. So it was both a course in abnormal psychology, a course in film history and film craft, and also a course that would teach observation, because I use the films to help people see more clearly and see more precisely. After procrastinating for way too long, COVID lockdowns helped me finally sit down and put my experience teaching the course onto the page. The book came out just a week ago, officially on the 31st, and it's published by Johns Hopkins Press, and I titled it very cleverly, Madness at the Movies. This is my first book, and it's a thrill to finally have it out in the world. Though there is a chapter in the book on how therapy is shown in movies, and why it's so difficult to get it right, there's not much discussion in the book specifically of how psychiatrists and other therapists have been portrayed over the years. But I found that an interesting subject, something worth exploring, but with a light tone, since much of it is odd or funny or simply wrong, often all three. So we'll start. Images of psychiatrists go back to the very beginnings of the movies, and one of the most famous is the silent film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920. This is a brilliant German expressionist film. The decor mirrors the psychotic world of the protagonist. The background is filled with sharp angles, painted shadows. Everything seems a little off kilter. The camera is tilted. The plot has many twists. There's a mysterious murder that is happening, murders that are happening in the town. And we meet Dr. Caligari as a sideshow attraction, showing off his sleepwalking patient, Cesar, who we later see is being sent on murderous assignments by the doctor. Let's take a look. Jack? Sound is bad, Jack. Do you want to try it again? Well, we'll do without the sound. This is the psychiatrist. Okay. We will discover that Caligari is the director of the insane asylum experimenting on his patients. He is the embodiment of evil, not a promising advertisement for psychiatry, but the plot thickens in this story. By the way, I wanted to mention something. One of the things that I point out in this other book that I'm doing that I'll tell you about maybe when we finish, where I'm walking through something of the history of movies, is that silent movies were never silent. And from day one, as soon as they figured out how to project movies on a screen instead of the Nickelodeon where you looked into a machine, from day one, there was music. It was live music, usually a piano, sometimes a small orchestra. And as the industry matured, they would provide the music to be played with each film. But originally, these were improvisations. So a silent movie it's misleading as a title, so that you can see during the brief moment that we had some music with this this clip, it really adds a lot, and something is lost when things go absolutely silent. Anyway, plot thickens in this story, and it's worth paying attention to it because we discover that Francis, who is telling this tale, and is the fellow that we saw in bed in that brief clip, is himself an asylum inmate. All the other characters in the story are too, and Cesar is an innocent and has killed no one. This explains, by the way, the expressionistic landscape of the movie. We're seeing the entire world through the eyes of someone who's psychotic. Dr. Caligari, who really is the asylum director, declares that he can cure Francis of his delusions. And I have to say, his unnerving confidence about this may be the scariest thing in the movie. So this is how psychiatrists were this may have been really the first presentation of psychiatrists in film. Once sound came, ushering in the golden age of Hollywood, instead of a horror villain, the psychiatrist was a figure of fun. He was a cliche with a Viennese accent, a prim authority, a monocle, or maybe a pipe. Now, this image was not such a stretch, since the first psychiatrists in America who became prominent, they were all analysts, disciples of Freud, refugees from Austria and Germany. And to an American audience, they were obviously foreign, and they seemed strange and maybe a little silly. The next clip we're going to see is from the movie Bringing Up Baby, 1938, one of the best screwball comedies of the era, in fact, of all time, starring Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant at their best. Grant is an introverted paleontologist who's been spending his time assembling a full-size brontosaurus for a museum. Hepburn is a dizzy dame who sets her sights on him, and Baby is her tame pet leopard. Comic confusions ensue, and this may well be one of the funniest films I've ever seen. I highly recommend it if you don't know it. But here is a very brief clip of Katharine Hepburn in a casual encounter with a psychiatrist, basically irrelevant to the story, but showing us just how unconventional she is and also how strange the psychiatrist is. Jack?
Okay.
No sound again. Let's leave it because let's see if the dialogue comes.
The olive dish?
No, it's all right. I'll sit here. You don't mind, do you?
Not at all.
This is rather big book.
I can see.
You know, your face is familiar. Haven't we met somewhere?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, I think you're wrong. My name's Susan Vance.
I'm Dr. Fritz Lee.
Oh, well, that's all right. You can sit down. I don't mind at
Thank
all.
you. You may have heard me lecture.
Well, what do you lecture about?
I usually talk about nervous disorders. I am a psychiatrist.
Oh, crazy people.
We dislike the use of that word. All people who behave strangely are not insane.
Okay, Bringing Up Baby. Psychiatry and therapy began to be taken seriously in the 1940s, mostly because starting in the 1940s, it became an in thing in Hollywood for the makers of movies to be in psychoanalysis. They wanted to share it with the world. I don't have much sympathy for psychoanalysis. It is interesting intellectually, providing occasionally useful metaphors for how people work, but many of its concepts are in disrepute. It is mediocre as therapy, often ineffective and very inefficient, demanding extreme commitments of time and money. And for some forms of madness, like acute psychosis, where any grip on reality needs to be encouraged, it's absolutely contraindicated. However, it was the only recognized form of talking therapy in the 1940s, and pretty much defined the field then. So if you're going to talk about it or try to show it, you should at least get it right. In those years, it seemed that only women went into therapy in the movies. These were the so-called women's pictures, tearjerkers, stories of women in love triangles or mother-daughter struggles, of unwed mothers or issues of career versus family. Now Voyager from 1942 with Bette Davis is a classic example. Here, Claude Rains is the ever-present psychiatrist. By the way, Claude Rains is a wonderful actor with this velvet voice. A benign figure, sort of like a wise uncle, seemingly available on demand, working miracles, though we never see anything that looks like therapy, and transforming a frump dominated by her overbearing mother into a sophisticated woman confident enough to have an affair with a married man. Now, this is a four-handkerchief weepy with a terrific performance by Davis, and it has a very famous closing line as she ends the affair. Don't ask for the moon when we have had the stars. These films take psychoanalysis quite seriously, but they never show it. In The Snake Pit from 1948, however, one of the first films to highlight the institutional failures of mental hospitals, the psychiatrist stands apart, all-knowing, gentle authority, the rationalist. Olivia de Havilland plays Virginia, who's been hospitalized with symptoms of schizophrenia and is now considered cured. Here is Leo Genn as her doctor, still foreign, he's English, not German, but no longer a figure of fun. And he explains it all to her. Jack?
Hi, doctor. Why am I getting well? Is it because I'm supposed to know why I got sick?
Do you?
Well, I know what you think. It's because of what happened to me years ago, like that dog when I was a little girl.
Well, not quite. You didn't get sick only because of the dog.
Was it because my father and mother were so angry with me?
In a way, yes. Look, it all starts long before you can even talk.
It's funny.
What is it?
Everything you've said seems to make sense. I feel as though I know it. Here.
But you don't quite understand it all here? Don't worry, it doesn't matter. You may never know why everything happened, but now you do know how and where it started, and that does matter. Look, it's as though you were in a dark room, like this one. Now, and you wanted to turn on the light, but you couldn't because you didn't know where the switch was. Now you do. You may never know why turning that switch makes the light go on, but you don't have to. As long as you know where it is, you don't ever have to be afraid of being in the dark again. And that I'm sure you'll be able to do very soon.
It seems that the world of these films from this time, almost every psychiatrist's office has a picture of Sigmund Freud gazing approvingly from the wall. In the movie What About Bob, a comedy from 1991, we have another psychiatrist who explains it all. This movie stars Bill Murray, wonderfully funny as Bob, a multiphobic, very dependent patient, and Richard Dreyfuss as Dr. Marvin, his new doctor. Freud isn't just gazing from the wall here, he's part of the furniture. Dr. Marvin is equally sure of himself, pontificating, but also promoting. Jack?
I see.
Screen share, Jack.
Yeah.
I see. So what you're saying is that even though you are an almost paralyzed multiphobic personality that is in a constant state of panic, your wife did not leave you, you left her because she liked Neil Diamond.
No, you're saying that maybe I didn't leave her because she likes Neil Diamond, but maybe she left me?
Yes.
Ow, 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 ow. Dr. Marvin, you can help me. For the first time in my life, I feel like there's hope. I feel like I can be somebody.
Bob, there's an old saying that the best psychiatrist in the world is the one right inside of you.
Yeah,
I can help you. Yes.
thank you.
Bob, there is a groundbreaking new book that has just come out. Now, not everything in this book, of course, applies to you, but I'm sure that you will see when you see the title exactly how it could help.
Baby steps?
Oh, certainly, my secretary told you. As of this afternoon, I'm taking my family on vacation until Labor Day.
That's a month. What if I need you? What if I need to talk?
Well, my associate, Dr. Harmon, would be happy to talk. And Bob, I'll be back. Just read baby steps.
Baby steps out of the office.
Very good.
Baby steps to the hall.
Very good, Bob. Keep going. That's it. Bye. I'll see you in a month.
Baby steps to the elevator. Baby steps to the elevator.
July 31st, Bob Wiley, introductory interview. Multiphobic personality, characterized by acute separation anxiety and extreme need for family connections. Bill the usual rate for the interview and $29.95 for the book.
I absolutely love how the doctor surveys the bookshelf, pretending to look for just the right book when there's about 30 copies of this yellow cover on the bottom shelf. And I love the kicker, the $29.95. That's just perfect. Of course, sometimes rational can get you into trouble. In by the way, What About Bob is a brilliantly funny movie for 2/3 of the length, and then it totally loses track. But for that 2/3, it's absolutely brilliant. And Bill Murray is just at the top of his game in that film. I recommend it to you. Where was I? Oh, of course, sometimes being rational can get you into trouble. In Val Lewton's classic horror film, The Cat People from 1942, Simone Simon goes to a psychiatrist because she believes that whenever she's aroused sexually, she turns into a man-eating panther. The doctor, the voice of reason and authority, carefully explains that it's all a fantasy. Angered, she promptly turns into a panther and eats him. Psychiatrists and the supernatural do not mix. Alfred Hitchcock's film Spellbound, 1945, was the first to make psychoanalysis central to the plot, and even to have both a good guy and a bad guy psychiatrist. Ingrid Bergman is Constance, a psychiatrist, and we know to take her seriously because she wears her hair in a bun, she wears glasses, and seems like a bit of a cold fish compared to sexy patient Rhonda Fleming. But then she falls in love with her patient, Gregory Peck, another psychiatrist, or is he? He has amnesia and he may have killed the man he's pretending to be. Ingrid takes him to her teacher and analyst, Dr. Brulov, played wonderfully by Michael Chekhov, who was the nephew of the famous playwright. Salvador Dali created the image for the dreams in Spellbound. I'm not sure anyone but Dali's dreams look like this, but it certainly captures something of how weird a dream can be. So let's watch Brulov give a quite good explanation of psychoanalysis and the concept of transference. And then he and Constance analyze a dream. But let's see how the dream is used. Jack? This is a Hitchcock film, to remind you.
Who are you?
I'm Dr. Bruloff.
Bruloff. Oh, yeah, that's right. Bromides. Who's been feeding me bromides?
I gave you to sleep.
Bruloff. Oh, yes. Rochester.
What's your name?
I don't know. Constance.
Oh, nobody told me. If I don't know a patient with amnesia when I see one, what do I know? You don't remember your father or mother?
No.
Wife or sweetheart?
No.
Don't fight me. I'm going to help you if I can. I'm going to be your father image. I want you to look on me like your father. Trust me, lean on me. This is a shortcut, but we haven't much time.
All right, go ahead. I'm leaning.
Maybe you got something you want to tell me, a single thought, a few words in the corner of your head. Go on, talk to me. Whatever comes into your head, just say what it is.
There's nothing.
Maybe you dreamt something.
Yeah.
What did you dream?
I don't believe in dreams. That Freud stuff's a lot of hooey.
Oh, you are a fine one to talk. You've got amnesia and you've got a guilt complex. And you don't know if you're coming or going from someplace. But Freud is hooey. This you know. A wise guy.
You don't like me, Papa.
You want I should help you or not?
I'm sorry.
I explained to you about dreams, so you don't think it is hooey. The secrets of who you are and what has made you run away from yourself, all these secrets are buried in your brain, but you don't want to look at them. The human being very often doesn't want to know the truth about himself because he thinks it will make him sick. So he makes himself sicker, trying to forget. You follow this?
Oh, how do you feel?
Coffee.
Awful.
The patient is going to tell us what he dreamt.
Oh, fine. I'll take notes. I'll get my glasses.
Now, here's where dreams come in. They tell you what you are trying to hide, but they tell it to you all mixed up like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit. The problem of the analyst is to examine this puzzle and put the pieces together in the right place and find out what the devil you are trying to say to yourself.
Let's see. I kept thinking while I was dreaming that all this meant something. That there was some other meaning in it that I ought to find out.
We'll find out.
I can't make out just what sort of a place it was. It seemed to be a gambling house. But there weren't any walls, just a lot of curtains with eyes painted on them. A man was walking around with a large pair of scissors, cutting all the drapes in half. And then a girl came in with hardly anything on and started walking around the gambling room, kissing everybody. She came to my table first.
Did you recognize this kissing bug?
I'm afraid she looked a little like Constance.
This is plain, ordinary, wishful dreaming. Go on.
I was sitting there playing cards with a man who had a beard. I was dealing to him. I turned up a 7 of clubs. He said, "That makes 21. I win." When he turned up his cards, they were blank. Just then, the proprietor came in and accused him of cheating. The proprietor yelled, "This is my place, and if I catch you cheating again, I'll fix you." about that kissing bug.
I'm glad you didn't dream of me as an egg beater, as one of my patients did.
Why, what would that mean?
Never mind.
Well, does it make any sense to you what I dreamed?
Not yet. You were trying to tell yourself something. What it is, we'll figure out later.
There's a lot more to it.
Go on and try to recall the details. The more cockeyed, the better for the scientific side of it.
He was leaning over the sloping roof of a high building. It was the man with the beard. I yelled at him to watch out. Then he went over, slowly, with his feet in the air. Then I saw the proprietor, a man in a mask. He was hiding behind a tall chimney, and he had a small wheel in his hand. I saw him drop the wheel on the roof. Suddenly, I was running. Then I heard something beating over my head. It was a great pair of wings. The wings chased me and almost caught up with me when I came to the bottom of the hill. I must have escaped. I don't remember. That's all there was. I woke up and saw Dr. Brulov.
Have some coffee.
Thanks. Something's happening.
What is it? Snow.
The light frightened him. Photophobia.
No, it was the snow. That's the white he's afraid of. Snow and those tracks.
What tracks?
The sled tracks in the snow. The first symptom he revealed was shock at the sight of fault lines drawn on a white tablecloth. In my robe, it had dark lines on it. And last night, the white covered it. Like those dark tracks in the snow.
We'll pull the blinds down, please.
Dr. Edwards was fond of sports. He mentions tennis and skiing in his book as valuable in the treatment of mental disorders. Skiing. Ski tracks in the snow. That's what those dark lines symbolized for him. His horror of them means, of course, that they are immediately connected with the cause of his amnesia.
Yes, murder on skis.
This is a long night.
Where did Edwards go for his skiing? We must find out. Can you tell us where? Try.
He has told us already. In his dream. Let me see your notes.
What can we do for him?
Oh, you're not his mama. You're an analyst. Leave him alone. He will come out of this by himself. The sloping roof. That means only mountainside.
They were skiing. The father image, the bearded man, is Dr. Edwards. That's very simple. Dr. Edwards plunged over the precipice while skiing.
And then a shadow chases him up and down a hill. That could mean he was escaping from a valley.
Skiing resorts are often called valleys, like Sun Valley. He was being pursued by a winged figure, a witch or a harpy.
No, the figure was you. If you grew wings, you would be an angel.
Dream's trying to tell him the name of the resort. Angel. Angel Valley. Do you remember Angel Valley? We could call a travel agency and check all the resort names.
It wasn't Angel Valley. I remember it. It was a place called Gabriel Valley.
What else do you remember now?
Who was the masked figure in your dream?
It was an accident. Do you remember that? A skiing accident. Dr. Edwards went over a snowball.
It was no accident. I can't stand this anymore. I've had enough. We've got to call the police.
No. We have to go to Gabriel Valley. You got to go with me.
Okay, now My first reaction is, whose dream is this anyway? Traditionally, in classic analysis or any psychotherapy that's informed by it, the associations to a dream or any fantasy that a patient brings to therapy must be the patient's own. They may reflect archetypes or common themes, but they're personal, to be understood in the context of the patient and the doctor's expanding knowledge of the patient's world, not the doctor's world. Here, all the associations in the dreams were the doctor's associations, especially the connection of Constance with the angel. Whose fantasy is that anyway, Dr. Brulov? Later, Dr. Brulov gives Constance this bit of advice, very much reflecting his time. And I quote, "Women make the best analysts," he says, "but when they fall in love, they make the best patients." As we moved to the 1960s, psychiatrists began to seem a little bit more human, less dogmatic, less sure of themselves. The rigid rules and certainties of analysis have been modified or discarded, though some of the concepts remain, such as a belief in the unconscious and the interest in dreams. The therapist and the patient face each other. There's more active interaction, and cognitive and systems therapies challenge the dominance of psychoanalysis. In the movie David and Lisa from 1962, the sympathetic psychiatrist, played by Howard Da Silva, is a compassionate but passive man, smartly waiting for his patient to come to him. He's anything but the oracular figure of earlier decades. But still, we see the doctor telling the patient the meaning of his dream. Jack?
Well,
Sounds good, Jack, but screen share.
well, you won the battle. I'm in your office.
I didn't know we were having a battle. Want to stop?
No, I'm not staying. I merely came to find out if you've analyzed my dream.
I couldn't do that without talking with you.
Typical psychiatrists, Dodge.
You don't like psychiatrists much.
They think they have all the answers.
That's one thing I'm sure I haven't got.
I've interviewed a few of your colleagues. Of course, they thought they were interviewing me.
I'd like to hear about it.
Yes, I'm sure you would. I'm here to find out what you thought about my dream.
What did you think about it?
Don't play Dr. Freud, answering one question by asking another. Go ahead. Say it. The dream proves I'm crazy.
No, it doesn't.
I presume that comes under the heading of reassurance. Give the kid comfort and support. I think I'm crazy. Aren't you going to tell me anything about my dream?
You sounded angry. Cutting off John's head that way.
Brilliant analysis.
You're terribly afraid of death, aren't you?
Aren't you?
Now who's playing Freud?
Go on.
It shows in your dream in two ways. First, you're killing your enemies, which will make you feel safer. And second, you're pulling on the blade so that you control life and death. I wish you'd stay.
I know you do, Doctor.
How different this is from Spellbound. Here, the doctor breaks the rules and explains the dream because David, his patient, demands it. David is really asking, can you help me? The psychiatrist's interpretation hits a nerve, and David abruptly gets up to leave, but you know he'll be back. In the 1980s, we begin to see films that show us something closer to the everyday reality of therapy, what the rules are, how it works. Let's look at a few moments in Ordinary People from 1980. This is actually the film that inspired my Yale Madness at the Movies course. It has the most sympathetic and convincing portrait of therapy, with a marvelously engaging Judd Hirsch as the psychiatrist. In contrast to the clean, white over-control of Conrad's home, a reflection of his mother's inability to tolerate a mess, we have the therapist's office, brown, cluttered, casual. The therapist is straight talking, no euphemisms, and insists that therapy is hard work, but worth it. Jack?
Jared. How long since you've been out of the hospital?
Month and a half.
Feeling depressed?
No.
On stage?
Pardon me?
People nervous, treating you like you're a dangerous character?
Yeah, I guess a little.
Are you?
No.
How long were you in the hospital?
4 months.
What did you do?
I tried to off myself. Isn't it down there?
Doesn't say what your method was.
Double-edged super blue.
Oh. So how does it feel being home? Everybody glad to see you?
Yeah.
Friends?
Yeah.
Okay, everything? You're back in school? Everything okay at school? Teachers?
Yeah.
No problems.
Mm-mm.
So why are you here?
I'd like to be more in control. Yes.
Why?
So people can quit worrying about me.
Who's worried about you?
My father mostly. This is his idea.
What about your mother? Isn't she worried about you too?
I don't know. Listen, if you're a friend of Dr. Crawford's, you're probably all right, but I'll be straight with you. I don't like this already.
Well, as long as you're straight.
What do you know about me? Have you talked to Crawford?
Yes, he called me on the phone. He told me your name and he told me to look for you. And, he said you had a brother who died. Boating accident, wasn't it? You want to tell me about it? Well, I suppose you talked this over with Crawford at the hospital, right?
Right.
Good. How'd that go?
Didn't change anything.
What'd you want to change?
I told you I'd like to be more in control.
Why?
I told you so people can quit worrying about me.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'll be straight with you, okay? I'm not big on control. But it's your money, so to speak. So to speak. Okay. How's Tuesdays and Fridays, same time?
Twice a week.
Wow, control's tough nut.
I got swim practice every night.
That's the problem. How we solve that?
Guess I have to skip practice twice a week and come here.
Well, it's up to you.
I don't like being here. I gotta tell you, I don't like being here at all. We just don't connect.
Why not?
I don't know, we just don't.
What are you thinking?
I jack off a lot.
So what else is new? Does it help?
For a minute.
What now?
John Boy. You know, in the Waltons, John Boy.
What about it?
My father came into my room and he didn't know what to say. And this is right after Buck died. I was thinking he's so uptight, he's gonna crack off. And I knew I should have felt something. I didn't know what to feel. I kept thinking what they say on TV, you know, stuff like, oh no, and oh my God. I didn't say them. I didn't feel sad so much as
So much as what?
I don't know. I kept thinking that John Boy would have said something about the way he felt, you know, something.
What would John Boy have said? Come on.
What?
Don't hold back. What Christmas tree and everything was hunky-dory, okay?
You're the doctor.
Don't take refuge in one-liners like you're the doctor, okay? Because that pisses me off. So everything was fine until you had the fight with your mother, and everything was lousy.
Yeah, but I don't blame her. I mean, she's got her reasons. It's impossible after all the shit I pulled.
What shit have you pulled? Hey, remember, I'm talking proportion here. Now, what shit? Come on, you must be able to come up with at least one example. And don't give me I try to kill myself. That's old turkey. What have you done lately?
Lately? Hey, come on, if you listen, I'm never going to be forgiven for that. Never. You know, you can't get it out. You know, all the blood in her towels and her rug. Everything had to be pitched. Even the tile in the bathroom had to be regrouted. Christ, she fired the goddamn maid because she couldn't dust the living room right. You think I'm gonna forgive it? She's gonna forgive me.
No problem is a real solution.
I've heard this all before.
It doesn't make it any less true.
I'm so tired.
Yeah, well, that's a hell of a secret you've been keeping on yourself.
So what do I do now?
Recognize her limitations.
You mean like she can't love me?
Oh, kiddo, no. Like she can't love you enough. Like, don't blame her for not loving you more than she's able.
She loves my father. I know she loved my brother. It's me.
Huh. Now we're back to the rotten kid routine. She can't love you because you're unlovable. Where does it leave your dad? How come he loves you? You're a rotten kid, doesn't he know that?
That's different. He feels responsible. Besides, he loves everybody.
Oh, I get it. The guy's got no taste. He loves you, but he's wrong. Look. Maybe she just can't express it the way you'd like her to. Maybe she's just afraid to show you what she feels.
What do you mean?
I mean, there's someone besides your mother you gotta forgive.
You mean me? Trying to off myself? Don't just sit there and stare at me. What for?
Why don't you give yourself a break? Let yourself off the hook.
What did I do? What did I do?
We'll talk about it on Thursday.
Come on.
Time's up.
What do you mean? You're gonna pull the plug? Come on. What did I do?
Come on, Connie, you know the rules.
Rules? What rules? Can't I have a few minutes?
You think about it. Just think about it.
Jesus. But I'm supposed to take care of it. I'm supposed to take care of it.
And that wasn't fair, was it?
No. And then you say, hang on. And then you let go. Why'd you let go?
Because I got tired.
Yeah. Well, screw you, you jerk. Yeah, we didn't see how a bad thing might happen.
Bad things happen even when people are careful.
Screwed around out there. We shouldn't have. We should have come in when it started to look bad.
Okay, so you made a mistake.
Let go. Why?
Maybe you were stronger. Did it ever occur to you that you might have been stronger? How long are you going to punish yourself? When are you going to quit?
God, I'd like to quit.
Why don't you?
It's not easy. It's not that easy. God, you loved him.
I know.
She was busy. She was feeling good. And
And what? What?
I just wish I know. I could have done something.
You saw her once, and now you want to take her on too.
No. No, I just.
What?
That isn't it. I feel bad about this. I feel really bad about this, and just let me feel bad about this.
Listen, I feel bad about it too.
Why do things have to happen to people? It isn't fair.
You're right. It isn't fair.
You just do one wrong thing, and
And what was the one wrong thing you did? You know. You know.
I hung on. Stayed with the boat.
Exactly. Now you can live with that, can't you? Feelings are scary. And sometimes they're painful. And if you can't feel pain, then you're not going to feel anything else either.
I think that is great stuff. I think it's wonderful, and the acting is so good. That's the young Timothy Hutton as Conrad. That was his first movie, and he won an Oscar for it. And I also think Judd Hirsch was just quite remarkable too. We see that Berger, the psychiatrist, urges Conrad to explore the feelings that scare him, and he doesn't give him easy answers. He insists that Conrad can figure it out for himself. Okay, what do we make of Robin Williams' therapist in Good Will Hunting, a very popular film from 1997? Here we see a good example of a therapist trying to initially find common ground with a reluctant patient, even to sharing personal stories about him and his wife. This is a bonding maneuver, a part of therapy, a way to begin. Let's look at Good Will Hunting. Jack? This is a shorter clip.
I have been late, really. Big time, big time, big time.
I'm not seeing the video, Jack.
Going out again? I don't know. Why not? I haven't called it. Christ, you're an amateur. I know what I'm doing.
Try again.
Don't worry about me. I know what I'm doing. Yeah,
There we go.
this girl's like, beautiful.
You back it up?
She's fun.
Back it up.
She's different from most of the girls I've been with. So call her up. I have been late, Really? Big time, big time, big time. I went on a date last week. How'd it go? It's good. Going out again? I don't know. Why not? Haven't called it. Christ, you're an amateur. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. Don't worry about me. I know what I'm doing. Yeah, but this girl is like, beautiful. She's smart. She's fun. She's different from most of the girls I've been with. So call her up from you. Why? So I can realize she's not that smart, that she's fucking boring. This girl's like fucking perfect right now. I don't want to ruin that. Maybe you're perfect right now. Maybe you don't want to ruin that. But I think that's a super philosophy, Will. That way you can go through your entire life without ever having to really know anybody. My wife used to fart when she was nervous. She had all sorts of wonderful little idiosyncrasies. She used to fart in her sleep. Sorry, I shared that with you. One night it was so loud it woke the dog up. He woke up and goes like, "Oh, is that you?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't have the heart to tell her." Oh, God, she woke herself up. Oh, Christ. Well, she's been dead 2 years, and that's the shit I remember. Wonderful stuff, little things like that. Those are the things I missed the most. Those little idiosyncrasies that only I knew about. That's what made her my wife. When she had the goods on me too, she knew all my little peccadillos. People call these things imperfections, but they're not. Oh, that's the good stuff. And then we get to choose who we let into our weird little worlds. You're not a perfect sport. And let me save you the suspense. This girl you met, she isn't perfect either. But the question is whether or not you're perfect for each other. That's the whole deal. That's what intimacy is all about.
Okay. So he's giving advice here, and in a way that is connecting with somebody who otherwise would be fighting him in the therapy session. So I think this is a good interaction. A therapeutic moment happens a little bit later when he turns to around Damon's reason for not calling the girl. We saw that. But then he gets very avuncular, like a wise uncle, kind of like Claude Rains's character in the Betty Davis movie. And his advice is nobody's perfect. Well, okay, that's good. But it's not very profound, but it's a start, and it's a decent place to start. Of course, a little bit later, when Matt Damon's character presses the wrong button, he winds up throttling his patient and threatening to choke him to death. So this is not necessarily an ideal portrait of a psychiatric relationship, but it has some good moments, and this is one of them. Often the goal of therapy is to help the patient reinterpret the stories he tells himself about his life history in an attempt to realize that it is indeed not his fault, to forgive himself or his parents or whoever. This is a slow thing to come by, and it requires a lot of circling around the material again and again. Movies, however, need to wrap things up in 2 hours. So we too often get the therapist telling the patient what he should be discovering for himself. One thing people often have trouble understanding is the idea of boundaries in therapy, especially time boundaries, that a session is so many minutes and then time's up. Let's look at some different ways that therapists handle it. We've already seen Judd Hirsch's Dr. Berger in Ordinary People. I think he does it well. He urges Conrad to find his own answers to the issues they're talking about, but he insists that tomorrow is indeed another day. He wants Conrad to stew a bit, to think about it, to ponder what is just out of reach and find it himself. Several movies by Paul Mazursky, a neglected writer-director whose films were very popular in the 1970s, they're worth a look. His most successful film was An Unmarried Woman with Jill Clayburgh. It has several scenes of therapy with a psychologist who sits cross-legged on a cushion and who announces that, quote, guilt is a man-made emotion, close quote, whatever that means. And that upsets her so much, the therapist, that she won't allow her patients to feel it. You can imagine how well that works. Mazursky did something a bit unusual. In 3 of his films, his own analyst, Dr. Donald Muhich, played the analyst of his characters. Discussing that in Mazursky's own therapy sessions must have been interesting, and I frankly can't help thinking that Mazursky was hanging his analyst out to dry. Muhich is a very strange person with an odd, smirking demeanor, and most of the sessions were improvised, I understand, and they do have the rhythms of therapy. Let's see an excerpt from Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice from 1969. Jack?
I was just thinking that I got angry at him once. I don't know. I think it was because Bob and I. Did I say Bob? That was a Freudian slip. Ted and I. Ted and I were going to have sex, and we wanted to have sex. And, well, Jimmy walked into the room, and it was daytime, and I got nervous, so I scolded him for not knocking at the door before he walked in. Oh, he's so cute. You know, children are, I mean, they're very curious. Well, he wanted to know why I had a TT.
Pardon me? I don't know what a TT is.
Vagina.
Oh, it's a pet expression of yours.
Yes, you know words. Tink, tinkle, po, wee wee, kiki, poo poo.
I had never heard TT before.
What expression do you use with your children?
Vagina.
I'm really very embarrassed by this whole thing. I really am. I don't have anything else to say. I really don't.
When we come right up with sex, you become embarrassed.
What am I mean, what would you like? What am I supposed to say?
I have no one. Say what do you think you'd like to say?
I mean, do you think I need this? I mean, do you really think that you can help me?
I think it'd be useful to talk some more. I don't know for sure if I can help you or not. Do you think you can help yourself?
Ted is a very nervous man. Now, sex is very important to a man. You know that.
Well, it seems that our time is up for today.
Maybe I don't trust Ted.
Well, let's talk about that on Thursday.
Do you think that that's a possibility? Do you think that maybe that's what it's about?
Let's continue Thursday and we'll discuss it at that time.
Is it possible that I was being hostile to Carol? Could that? I don't know why it could be. Why do you think?
Our hour is over. I think we ought to take that up.
I resented her, and why was that? We played tennis.
It sounds like we have a lot to talk about, but let's do it at the next meeting, the same time at Tuesday. Let's stop now.
Here, Muhich is passive and rather ineffective. It's hard to talk about upsetting or embarrassing things, and if you can postpone them, you will. And if your therapist allows you to go over your hour, you might take advantage of that to delay having to deal with what you find hard to deal with. You need to know that the time you have is protected, but also limited and best be well used. Muhich is passive and rather ineffective and insists on a time boundary, but he doesn't help his patient, Diane Cannon here. He doesn't help her use the moment to better understand herself. He just keeps on repeating himself, time's up, time's up. Mazursky clearly had mixed feelings about his therapist. In a later film, Down and Out in Beverly Hills from 1986, he cast Muhich as a dog psychologist who diagnosed Bette Midler's dog as having nipple envy. A better example of rule setting in therapy is this moment from the film As Good as It Gets, 1997. Jack Nicholson is someone with a really bad case of OCD. Jack?
sidewalk in New York. That's where they put it. You want to see me, you will not do this. Make an appointment.
Dr. Green, how can you diagnose someone as an obsessive compulsive disorder and then act as though I had some choice about barging in?
There's not going to be a debate. You must.
You said you could help me. What was that? A tease?
I can help you if you take responsibility to keep
You
regular
changed the room
appointment
around.
2 years ago. I also regrew my beard, but you're not interested in changes in me. So
I don't have this mountain of available time. I have to get to my restaurant on time. You know how hard it was for me to come here.
Yes. No, we're not doing this now.
I changed just one pattern, as you always said I should.
No, nope.
Why were them?
Thank you. What if this is as good as it gets?
Oh.
Okay. There's a lot of rules of therapy, and I could talk a lot about them, but I see we're running long, so I'm going to skip through it. But the bottom line is that almost no matter what the theoretical basis of psychotherapy, whether it's analytic, whether it's cognitive, whether it's systems or family therapy, behavioral therapy, there's some basics. You need to create a safe space. There needs to be a sense of an alliance. The doctor has to be focusing on the problems of the patient and not the problems of the doctor. But very, very importantly is that there has to be a sense of an alliance between patient and doctor and sometimes to establish that takes a good long time, which is one of the reasons that it's very hard for films to convey that process. But if something interferes with this rule, it can be very hard for therapy to happen. And there's a very good and very funny example in the film Grosse Pointe Blank. Alan Arkin, who is one of my favorite comic actors, is a therapist who belatedly discovers that his new patient, played by John Cusack, is a hired assassin. Jack, can you show that? Grosse Pointe Blank?
Mine to my 10-year high school reunion. Invited to my 10-year high school reunion. I'm conflicted. I mean, I don't know if I really want to go. It's in Detroit, you know, and I grew up there, but I just honestly don't know what I have in common with those people anymore. Or with anyone, really. And they all have husbands and wives and children and houses and dogs, and you know, they'll make themselves a part of something, and they can talk about what they do. And what am I going to say? I killed the president of Paraguay with a fork. How have you been? I'm just thinking it'll be depressing. It'll be depressing. Shouldn't you be taking notes or something?
I'm not taking notes, Martin, because I'm not your doctor.
Please don't start with that stuff again.
Martin, I'm emotionally involved with you.
How are you emotionally involved?
I'm afraid of you.
You're afraid.
And that constitutes an emotional involvement, and it would be unethical for me to work with you under those circumstances.
Don't you think maybe you're just upset because I told you what I do for a living and you got upset and you're letting it interfere with our dynamic?
Whoa. Martin, you didn't tell me what you did for a living.
Yes, I did.
You didn't tell me what you did for a living for 4 sessions. Then you told me, and I said, I don't want to work with you. And yet you come back every week at the same time. That's a difficulty for me. On top of that, if you've committed a crime or if you're thinking about committing a crime, I have to tell the authorities.
I know the law, okay? But I don't want to be withholding. I'm very serious about this process. And I know where you live.
Oh, now see, that wasn't a nice thing to say. That wasn't designed to make me feel good. That's a kind of a not too subtle intimidation. And I get filled with anxiety when you talk about something like that. I mean,
I was just kidding, all right? The thought never crossed my mind.
You did think of it, Martin. You thought of it and then you said it. And now I'm left with the aftermath of that, thinking I gotta be creative in a really interesting way now, or Martin's gonna blow my brains out. You're holding me hostage here. That's not right.
I just want to work, okay? There's some issues that I need to work on in my life. I've read your books, your bestsellers on the top 20.
They were both ghostwritten, Martin.
What, Annihilation of Death?
Yeah.
Kill Who, A Warrior's Dilemma? I read it, New York Times top 20.
Well, I don't know what to say.
Well, what do you say to other patients? You know, I don't know. How does it work? Ask me how I'm feeling.
How do you feel?
feeling uneasy, man. I'm just dispassionate. I'm bored. It's hard to stay in a good mood. Had problems at work, concept execution stuff, and just ill at ease.
Well, look, Martin, I don't want to suggest anything that might be uncomfortable for you, but you might just consider the possibility that part of your problem, part of the thing that's making you so miserable is the angst over killing a lot of people. Maybe I just put it in the background there.
Come on, if I show up at your door, chances are you did something to bring me there. Okay? I don't care about that stuff.
You don't care about what stuff?
Morality.
Hmm.
I don't want to talk about work, because I don't think necessarily what a person does for a living reflects who he is. So what do? We talk about dreams, or what's next? What's the score here?
Talk about dreams. We can talk about dreams. Joe Nickel.
Sure. I had another one about Debbie.
That girl you're obsessed with?
What do you think? Obsessed is a strong word.
Recurring dreams of loss and pain for 10 years featuring the same person. Yeah, maybe it's a bit excessive.
I had one where I was that television mechanical rabbit. With
the battery bunny.
Yeah, I was the bunny.
That sounds like a very, very depressed dream.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Mine is a terrible dream. It's a depressing dream to dream about that rabbit. It's got no brain. It's got no blood. It's got no anima. It just keeps banging on those meaningless symbols endlessly and going and going and going. Time is up.
Time's up already? We want to do a half a session? We just pretend like we have a normal doctor-patient relationship. I'll ask you a piece of advice. You give me an answer. Advice. Should I go to the reunion?
Yes, get out of town.
Thank you.
Go see some old friends. Have some punch. Visit with what's her name?
Debbie.
Debbie. Don't kill anybody for a few days. See what it feels like.
I'll give it a shot.
No, don't give it a shot. Don't shoot anything. Oh.
Okay, stop it here, Jack.
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
You want me to get out of this?
Yeah, please. Okay, because we're running long and I don't want to test anyone's patience too much more.
Okay.
Anyway, obvious. Therapy can't happen if the psychiatrist is afraid for his life. By the way, he interprets the dream. He does exactly what you're not supposed to do, but he's doing it because he wants to get this patient out of his office as quickly as possible. He has the manner and gravitas of a serious therapist, but there are many ridiculous shrinks in the movies, and I think we're going to stop after this one. One of my favorites is from the very first film that Woody Allen wrote called What's New, Pussycat, with Peter Sellers as Dr. Fassbinder, a quack with some creative ideas about therapy, and Peter O'Toole pretty much playing himself, who has a little problem with women. Jack? No, I'm going to do one more. No, we got no sound, Jack. We still have no sound. All right, I think we're going to abandon this one.
What's that?
I think we should stop. It's not working. I don't know why.
Okay.
But this one is dialogue. Well, I think the temper tantrum tells you something. Let's see if we can end with one final clip with from Analyze This with Billy Crystal. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jim. I just.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to skip to actually it's the next one. One of the things that I think is very interesting is that though psychiatrists increasingly look more human, more compassionate, more engaged, we rarely see how they handle a frustratingly difficult patient. And this is a very funny clip, I think, from Analyze This with Billy Crystal and Molly Shannon. I think it will be an amusing way to close.
telling him that I needed room to grow and to find myself as a person, you know, not just as a woman, but as an independent entity. And then I told him that I needed to get in touch with my uniqueness, but he could not handle that. He said that I was driving him away. He said I was driving him away. I was driving him away, Dr. Sobel.
Caroline, things end. It's just a part of life. It's how we deal with things ending that's important.
I just cannot believe that it's over between me and Steve, you know? I mean, maybe there's still hope.
Well, he did take out a restraining order against you, and I have to be honest, that's usually not a good sign.
But what should I do?
Well, the first thing that I think that you should do is to stop whining about this pathetic loser, for Christ's sakes. You are a tragedy queen. Steve doesn't like me. Steve doesn't respect me. Who gives a shit?
Dr. Sobel?
Yes, I was just reflecting on your whole situation. It's very interesting what you were saying. So I want you to think about it. And I'm going to think about it. So we'll both think about it.
Okay.
And we will continue next week when I get back from my vacation. Caroline, what are you feeling?
Just like Steve, wanna oh yeah.
Caroline, you know that's not true.
Yes, it's true.
I am going to see you next week, where Steve never wants to see you again.
He was a big man.
Let's stop it here.
Loved him. Very well respected. God rest his soul.
Oh, he passed away?
No, I just like saying God rest his.
Thanks, Jack. I'm going to just mention something else that I might show you some examples of, but I see how we're going much longer than I anticipated. One of the things that has been a major advantage of long form television is opportunities, because they have the extra time of often a series running for even some years, but even in any 1 year, 12 to 15 episodes, is to show therapy in greater detail and to show the gradual, more subtle changes in therapy in a much more realistic way. One of the pioneers in that was The Sopranos from HBO, where the relationship between Tony Soprano and Dr. Melfi really was a convincing one, and many of the brief moments of therapy that we saw also really kind of rang true. Another series that I would recommend to you if you don't know it is an HBO series from it's about, my gosh, it's about 15 years ago, called In Treatment. I don't know how many of you know it, but it starred Gabriel Byrne, and it was based on an Israeli television series, and did a remarkable job of conveying the essence of therapy with a very clever structure. The show was on 5 nights a week for 12 weeks, and every Monday night, Gabriel Byrne, the doctor, would have his Monday night patient, and on Tuesday he would have his Tuesday patient, and Wednesday and Thursday, each one patient who would be seen once a week for the 12 weeks, which is a fairly traditional length of time for a time-limited therapy. So and in subsequent seasons, he would have different patients during those first 4 days. The 5th day of each week, we would see him meeting with his supervisor and discussing the patients that we've seen during the course of the week. There was a gradualness and a fluidity and time given for the boring parts of therapy that are sometimes necessary before the therapy can actually be useful. And so I recommend this series to you if you are interested. The acting was absolutely superb. Gabriel Byrne was in all of the first 3 seasons of the series, but several of the people who played the patients were just absolutely stellar in how genuine they came across. Okay, and one just final thing I'd like to mention is that one of the downsides of seeing a good therapy in the movies, like for instance some of the moments in Ordinary People that are touching and you feel both compassion and that you're spending time with someone who has some wisdom and understanding. One of the problems is then your patients who come to you compare you to Dr. Berger, and they wonder why somehow or other you're not as perfectly warm and understanding as he is. And there's a scene that I didn't show where after the most upsetting moment where Berger picks up on Conrad vividly experiencing the drowning incident with his brother, and winds up speaking for his brother as though his brother is there. This is a powerful technique. And at the end of it, they're both exhausted, and he gives him a hug. And Conrad asks him, "Are you my friend?" And he says, "Yes, I'm your friend." And what he's saying, what he means when he's saying that is, "I'll be there for you if you need me." But he's not your friend. He's not Conrad's friend. He's a therapist. He's not someone you invite to a beer or go to the movies with. And the idea needs to be understood and emphasized, and often films don't do this, that there are defined boundaries that make the therapy work. And one of the important things is that the therapist isn't part of your daily life. And there's a separateness there that makes the space safe to be able to explore whatever you need to explore. Okay, there are more movies I could show to illustrate some of that, but I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Jim? In treatment, by the way, I think went 4 or 5 seasons, and Beit Tipul, the Hebrew Israeli section, only went 2 years. But the patient types were consistent between the first 2 years. They used versions of it, which was interesting to see. Even though these are both films and TV, you can still see cultural differences between the way the Israelis worked with their patients, the psychologist, the Israeli psychologist, who I think is a son of one of the premiers.
One of the things that, the show, I thought it just ran the three seasons, the American version, but then there was a long gap, and about 10 years later, or actually maybe 15 years later, within the last 2 or 3 years, they resuscitated it with a different therapist and totally different stories. And I gave that a glance, and I didn't think it worked anywhere near as well. A lot depends on the quality of the writing and the acting. But basically, each one of these sequences was like a mini play that just had plenty of time to work out. Really fascinating. And the idea of having him be able to talk with his supervisor at the end, which gave you a different way of understanding why he was doing what he was doing, and his doubts about it, and his concerns about maybe being inadequate or responding badly to a situation. I thought that was very convincing.
They're both Jennifer Melfi and Paul. Is it Paul? I can't remember his name. Were very flawed therapists.
Yes.
And serious boundary issues, and that's what I used those films to talk with students about was boundary issues, and they're both very powerful for talking about how problematic boundary issues can be.
Right, it's true. I mean, Paul saw people in his house, and often you couldn't quite tell whether he was in the living room or in his office. Yeah, a lot of boundary issues there, but also very powerfully effective moments. And I guess if you have, especially with one of these series that can go on for a while, you've got plenty of time to show things going well and show things where people are showing poor judgment. And I think that maybe is worth seeing every bit as well. One of the things I always used to emphasize when I would teach my course, and there's some of it in the book, is that both mistakes in how the various kind of mental illnesses are presented, as well as mistakes in therapy, are every bit as educational as seeing it done right, as long as you point it out and talk about it.
Jim, I want to get a quick movie trivia word in edgewise.
Yes.
In Good Will Hunting, in one of the scenes where he's in front of the blackboard teaching, my uncle's name is on the board, George Engel.
Oh. Oh, well, okay, well, that's a famous name, actually.
Yeah.
So, yes, okay, that
Very
makes
nice.
sense.
And the other quick thing is the author of the Abnormal Personality Through Literature is Alan Stone.
Okay, I will look it up. Thank you.
Welcome. And enjoyed it very much.
Good, thank you.
Jim,
The
the
Sopranos consultant, psychiatric consultant couple, friends of mine through the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology too. They're good consultants.
Jim, I was going to comment on the clip you showed from Bob and Carol, Ted and Alice. Several years ago, closer to the time that the film came out, there was a presentation at the APA. And the consultant to that film, the real psychiatrist that consulted, I talked about how the scene was created. And in order to make Jan Cannon more anxious, they didn't give her a script. They just gave her a situation. So she was actually ad-libbing.
Yes.
But the real kicker in this was that ending where she keeps going on and he keeps saying over was tables on the actor that was doing that, because that she had anticipated that she would do, but he didn't know that she was going to be doing that.
Okay. And I gather he was also improvising. That was my understanding as well. But there wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot for him to do. Basically, you saw his facial expressions, I would not want to sit for a very long time in a room with that man.
What did you think of Sydney on MASH?
Oh, who was Sydney? Was he the doctor with the psychiatrist?
Psychiatrist, yeah.
You know what? I don't remember it well enough to.
It's one of the first times I thought on TV that the psychiatrist had some psychiatric sense in a common sense kind of a way, as opposed to someone who just tried to make people feel better, which seemed to be like, except for the analysts in the movies. This was a portrayal of a psychiatrist who had, basically really common sense, and he was a recurring character too.
Right. Now that you mention it, I am remembering that, and I do remember that he did have common sense, which is necessary in a battlefield situation like that. I mean, you just don't have the luxury of some of the kind of things that Woody Allen makes fun of, where you have what's the great line he says? I've been in analysis for 15 years. If it doesn't work for me next year, I go to Lourdes.
It certainly didn't work for him.
I would say so.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Rick Miller.
Sure.
I really enjoyed your presentation, and I'm in the midst of reading your book, which I also find quite fascinating, but I have to confess to having looked ahead to see if you had any reference to Alfred Hitchcock's movie Marnie.
I don't.
I was curious that you had none in your footnotes, and just this 2 years ago, the English composer Nico Muhly made a wonderful opera out of Marnie, which the story of which is just fascinating and is full of psychopathology. And I was curious as to why you chose to omit from your catalog of the Alfred Hitchcock films, Marnie in particular.
Well, I'll tell you why. First of all, I mean, more broadly, I couldn't include everything, and I had to make choices. So basically, I chose movies that I thought were teachable and that I liked. And for reasons, and that would be a long discussion. I don't like the movie Marnie, and so it's not one I ever wanted to spend time with. So that's the rather shallow reason I didn't include it.
Okay.
But you're right. My take on it is that it pretends to show some really interesting psychological issues, or at least present them in a way that I don't find convincing, and that I didn't find interesting enough to be able to spend time discussing. But you're right. I mean, almost, my God, the Hitchcock, so many of his films present various psychological eccentricities or complexities that, including Hitchcock himself as a person, and his preoccupation with the blondes who were his heroines. Anyway, it's just not a film I felt a connection with. Any other thoughts? I alluded to something that Jack thought I should mention, which is, I mean, I've been very excited and pleased with this book coming out that came out just a week ago, the Madness of the Movies book, and it's something I've been wanting to write for years and just never sat down to do it until COVID made it happen, and also my son kind of kicked me in the butt for 20 years until I actually sat down and did it. But when I was finishing up, which was last spring, and I absolutely enjoyed doing the copy editing and the proofing. And finally, there was an indexer, and they hired a professional indexer, but they asked me to provide some input and add some extra categories to the index. And all of a sudden, I realized there was nothing more to do in this book. I was done, and it wasn't going to come out for 6 months. And I kind of got into a funk, and I spoke to my son, who's now on his 20th book, and said, and yes, exactly. And he said, you know, that he was, first of all, I knew that it was a common phenomenon to feel kind of depressed and down and a little bit at sea if you finish an intense project like that. But he said his solution was always start another book. And ideally to be starting the other book before the first one was finished, so that there would almost be no time where there didn't have a project. So he did what to me was a wonderfully sweet thing, which is he said, why don't we write a book together? And his latest, well, he had 2 books that came out this fall, but the first of the 2 is a book that was a little uncharacteristic for him. Noah is an art historian, and his specialty is art crime, and he's become kind of the go-to person to talk about art crime when there's a theft, when there's a forgery, when the issue comes up. But he's been branching out from that, and his newest book is called The 12-Hour Art Expert, and it's kind of an art history for dummies book. You know that series, the Dummies series, which is basically a very smart series of books. Sometimes they're absolutely brilliantly put together and have a lot of content. So he wrote basically an introduction to art history for people who are a little afraid to go into a museum and have no idea about it, but are interested in the subject. And he wrote it in a very entertaining, engaging style. And I frankly was very impressed with how much information he managed to convey in a way that felt painless. The book got very good reviews. It came out in October. And Noah got the idea that maybe his publisher would like this to be the structure for a series. And so Noah said, why don't we write the 12-Hour Film Expert? Because he knows I'm big on film. And he's also big on film because he happens to have grown up in my house. This was the 12-Hour Art Expert is his 3rd book with this publisher. So he's got a track record with them, and they are very much fans of him because they like working with him, and his books have done well. So the 2 of us put together a proposal which was fast-tracked. They approved it in 6 weeks, which is unheard of. And we've been writing it together. We're now halfway through, and it got me out of my funk. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. And we're writing alternate chapters and then editing each other's chapters. So anyway, I wanted to share with you that I've got another book coming out at our deadline is July, and if we're lucky, it'll come out a year after that. But meanwhile, I'm thrilled at how my Madness of the Movies book came out, and in part because it's a distillation of a course I taught for so many years, and that meant a lot to me. So and it just feels hefty. It feels substantial. So it was worth waiting 20 years to sit down and do it.
I'm
I have
glad.
one of your
that
son's books, Jim.
I'm sorry?
I just said I have one of one of your son's books about art theft.
Which one is that?
Well, I was trying to find it on my bookshelf, but I would take me a little more time because of the way I catalog books.
Oh, okay.
Or that I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe it's better way of putting
Yeah,
it.
I find that, I mean, what can I say? He's very pleased that he's never had a job. And he's never had never had a boss. And he's manages to not only churn out the books, but write articles for The Guardian, and he's a talking head on the BBC, but he figured out this niche while he was at Cambridge in England, that there was nothing, there was no academic study of art crime, and he kind of made that happen. And Cambridge provided some support for that. So that became his thing, and he's milked it and done very well with it. Because there's always art crime. It just happens, and people are interested in it. He did a wonderful book on forgery that I would recommend to you. Anyway, sorry, I got off track. Any other comments or suggestions or films that they wish I had mentioned or thought about?
Well, I just want to compliment you on presenting material about depictions of the therapeutic process. And that, I've seen a lot of talks on the portrayal of psychiatrists in movies, and they're usually talking about the ones where the psychiatrist is the murderer and, are the kind of villain. And it was nice to see a talk about the psychiatrist as a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Jim, for doing this. And Jack, you helped make it happen. So it was a nice collaboration. So
absolutely.
Good work, both of you.
A little bit of an uphill battle on a few of the clips, Jack, but we made it work. Thank you.
And yes, thanks very much to both of you. I think this was really well done. Thank you.
I don't know why Zoom